From the darkest corners of the creepy old house down the street to the screams in the night. Settle in, Parafamily, to join with Whitney and Brandon for another spooky episode of the Para-Unity Podcast.
Hello, Parafamily. What's up, Whitney?
What's up, Brandon? Things are good.
Good.
How's it hanging on your end?
If we could get our weather figured out in Iowa, we'd be in great shape.
Yeah, that's not going to happen because it's the same thing is happening here in Virginia, too. Oh, my God.
Oh, it's crazy. Well, tonight, speaking of Virginia, we are back in the great state of Virginia to speak with our friends Beth and Chris Houlihan, who head up Haunts of Richmond.
Woo!
Now, this is a place where you can go after the museums close and the sun goes down to hear the ghostly tales of the souls of Richmond and explore the dark side of Richmond, Virginia, also known as Whitney's home turf.
Okay, yes. Now, we've been to Richmond before with our friend Robert Bradley from CPRI. So some of this might be a review for you guys, but that's totally okay. But definitely Beth and Chris and the Haunts of Richmond, they have a lot of stories to share. But let's go ahead and get the context going first. Of course, Richmond, the capital of Virginia, it's home to the Richmond Speedway, minor league baseball team, the Flying Squirrels, and a plethora of art, history, and science museums, and several major universities, including Virginia Commonwealth University, or VCU, the University of Richmond, and Virginia Union University. It's really cool. My mouth hurts now because I'm smiling so much.
Well, hopefully you did better than I did, where I did like a 25-minute intro for my home area.
Oh yeah, I remember that was good. That was good.
That was brutally long, and I felt so bad for everybody, but you still stuck around. So Richmond's incredible, rich history begins and continues with the James River, which has provided transportation, food, and commerce for the indigenous tribes of the Eastern Woodlands. This includes over 32 tribes of the Powhatan Confederacy.
Powhatan.
Oh, Powhatan?
Yeah.
That's okay. Us Iowan people don't know how to talk.
You still did good.
Some of whom still call the land home. And Virginia actually still has 7 federally recognized tribes today.
And hopefully the number will grow. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
So Richmond became the capital in 1781 towards the end of the American Revolution, but it was already on the map when in 1775, Patrick Henry delivered his fiery and famous "Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death" speech at St. John's Church, which still stands today as a historic landmark. And funny enough, our guests actually live across the street from it. Literally across the street.
That is phenomenal.
It is awesome. Richmond also acted as the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War. And as the Confederacy left Richmond close to the time of surrender in 1865, they burned warehouses and railroad lines. So the incoming United States forces wouldn't be able to use any of the resources left behind when the Confederacy left. The jury selected to try Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, was the first one including both white and African-American jurors.
That's nice. That's super cool.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, Richmond played an incredibly active role in the enslavement of Africans since the beginning of its history. Due to its location on the river, Richmond became an active trading center. But before the Civil War, Richmond was the second largest domestic slave market in the United States behind New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, Richmond has had an active history in the civil rights movement, with such luminaries as Oliver Hill, Arthur Ashe Jr., and Maggie Walker lighting the way. Now, if you want to learn more about this history, Whitney can provide some resources for you.
Yep, I'll put some stuff up in the show notes for you guys later on. It's the whole, everything to do with the African-American history. of Richmond. It's just so vast and it's so deep and so awesome. And actually, some of the ghost stories do have some origins in that area, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So, yeah, a deep haunted history in Richmond too. So, the two areas I'm going to talk about are going to be involved in the Capitol Square. Where the Richmond State Capitol is located. The Capitol building was built between 1785 and 1788, designed by Thomas Jefferson, also known as the third president of the United States. And it's home to the Virginia General Assembly, which is the oldest elected legislative body in North America. Bing!
Bing!
Now, the most prominent hauntings in the Capitol building takes the form of disembodied cries and moans on the lower floors. That may be an echo from a disaster which took place in 1870. A balcony collapsed, killing 62 people during a legislative meeting. And there actually is a big story behind that. I've been in that room. It's pretty vast, so it's pretty cool in there. Another building in Capitol Square is the Virginia Governor's Mansion or Executive Mansion. It is the oldest occupied governor's mansion in the United States, serving since 1813. In the 1890s, the apparition of a lady was seen sitting at the window by then Governor Philip McKinney. She was later seen by a police officer, and since then has caused many strange things to happen, such as movement of paintings, causing a light to stay on even after it's turned off, and an icy freeze in the basement on a hot day. The ghost's identity is unknown, but she is there's also a spirit here called the Blue Lady, who was most likely a guest at a ball that was held at the governor's mansion. As she was leaving, her carriage slipped on a patch of ice and overturned, killing her. It is believed she returned to the place she last experienced happiness, and she has been there ever since. Funny enough, there's actually a book out called Policing the Paranormal, which was written by a police officer who actually has seen some of these hauntings. So, plugging that too.
This would have been a way cooler way for Cinderella to end.
You know what? There's a similar story from Williamsburg of Lady Anne Skipwith, who actually is kind of real and kind of not real, but she left her shoe behind in the dirt as she was going from the governor's palace to one of the houses in Williamsburg. Yeah. There's a lot of these stories. Who knows? That might have something to do with some of our topic that we'll talk about next time. But we have a haunted location.
All right, so the other haunted location that we're going to talk about before we bring our friends on is the Museum of the Confederacy. So part of this museum is the former White House of the Confederacy itself, containing Civil War artifacts, manuscripts, Confederate imprints, which are like books, pamphlets, stuff like that, and photos. But that's not all. It also has a ghost. So this portion of the museum is believed to be haunted by the spirit of none other than Jefferson Davis's 5-year-old son.
Yeah, I forget the child's name, but I actually had an experience when I was on tour outside the White House of the Confederacy. I actually felt something flick my ear. Yeah. So, but maybe Beth and Chris Houlihan might have some more insight into that. So, Para family, we are going to please come on into the chat. And if you have questions for Chris and Beth, please feel free to leave them. And we have our master storytellers of the Haunts of Richmond, Para family. Welcome, Chris and Beth Houlihan. Hi, guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Glad to be here tonight.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here too.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we got a couple cats in residence. So
okay, who have we got right there?
So this is Nico.
And I got Lulu off to my side.
So got a couple of kitty cats here. But
Yay.
So yeah, the you're talking about little Joe Davis was the young unfortunate young man who passed away at the governor's mansion, or rather after an accident at the governor's mansion. He passed away a couple hours later at the Memorial Hospital that was just a couple blocks away.
Yeah. And he was actually seen out on the street more than he was in the house. Always asking, "Have you seen my father?" And it's after he was actually interred at Hollywood Cemetery. And when they brought Jefferson Davis to be reinterred at Hollywood Cemetery, and Joe was moved closer, that was the last time he was seen.
So it's been, been well over a century because Jefferson Davis was reinterred at Hollywood Cemetery in, I forget the exact year. It was the late 1800s.
Yeah.
But for a couple of decades after the Civil War ended, Little Joe was seen wandering Clay Street outside the old White House of the Confederacy, playing with the kids during the day, but then looking for his father when all the other children scattered for dinner in the evening. So.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's nice that he got reunited with his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But to add to your ear, were you on the front porch when that happened?
I'm trying to think. I think, we were close to the front porch.
Okay, because there has been reported cigar smoke in that area. Some think those might be former guards when it was the White House of the Confederacy that are just there still guarding the property. We do know there's a female that is seen on the back porch areas that anybody who's in the VCU hospital there facing the White House of the Confederacy, they will see her on those back porches or in the windows as well.
Wow.
So we're not quite sure who she is. She may be a servant from the time of the Davises, or she may be from the original family that built the home.
Wow. And one thing I've got to give full kudos to you guys. You guys and and the other tour guides that work with you, you guys are awesome historical researchers. You guys try to back things up with as much of the primary sources as you can. So we really appreciate that, right, Brandon?
I just love the fact that they just smoothed right over. Yeah, the ghost child was playing with other kids during the day. And we're just like, yep. It's like just nice and threw that in there so smooth. And
he's not the only ghost child who plays with other kids during the days either.
I mean, other locations.
There are other locations, yeah. But,
well, before we talk about those other ones, how did you guys decide you're going to get started in the paranormal?
Dumb luck.
Yeah, I've been having experiences since I was a little kid. And when I went to college, I ended up actually developing the ghost tour for my college as a program for the house I was living in. That still goes today. It was all handed down orally. I never wrote anything down. But apparently it's still given on alumni weekends.
So you had a jump start on it in college. We met in college. College was way distant upstate New York. Graduated college, we wind up moving to Richmond. I take a day job as an engineer, which I still am an engineer.
Yeah, I took a day job as a teacher, now retired. I do this full time. But
one of your coworkers, Marcia, who is also one of the guides at Haunts of Richmond, she actually was the first guide for the company aside from the founders, Scott and Sandy Bergman. So Marcia gets this job as the tour guide in what would have been 2006?
2007 is when she started giving tours.
Okay.
Yeah. And I came in later that year.
Yeah, because she asked you to come on out for a tour, and then at the end of the tour, they collectively ambushed you and asked you if you wanted to become a tour guide. So that's how Beth came on board, and then
I dragged him kicking and screaming.
Basically, yes. And here I am today. So, but yeah, that's how we got involved with Haunts of Richmond. And then at the end of the 2015 season, Scott and Sandy decided to retire from the ghost tour business, and they looked at us and asked us if we wanted to go ahead and pick it up and run with it from there. And we've been doing it ever since. So we took what Scott and Sandy started and
expanded.
It have been slowly expanding it. We started with really kind of 3 tours. Now we're up to 6 tours, and we do all kinds of special events. And we also run year round, which is something that used to be just kind of a seasonal thing before. So keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, and actually you mentioned before we came on air that you have just finished doing a Facebook Live yourselves. You do regular
Yes.
Facebook Lives.
Yep, we started doing Facebook Live shows in March of 2020, which we all know what happened in March of 2020.
We still had to go to work from home. I had nothing to do, so Facebook Live shows it was.
Yeah, yeah, she was crawling up the walls, absolutely nothing to do while I was on my computer all day for my day job, and I just told her, it's like, just start researching something, and we're going to go live on Facebook on Monday night.
So now we have over 90 shows that we've done on Facebook, which have all been recorded over to YouTube as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, you can find all of them on Facebook, or admittedly YouTube is probably a little easier to search through the library of videos that we've done, but they're available there on both platforms.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And also, you don't just do Richmond topics in the Facebook Lives. You do other things too.
Yeah, the one we just finished tonight was Haunted Nevada.
Ooh.
And our next one will be Haunted England. So we bounce all over theme-wise, location-wise. I'm currently trying to work us through at least all 50 states. So
yeah. We actually kind of make it a point to actually on the Facebook Live stuff really not do Richmond stuff, because I mean that's what we do every day for the business. And so the Facebook Live, the whole idea behind that was kind of to help us in our own sanity back during the midst of COVID, to give us something to do, something to research. And while we were doing that, we kind of collectively got bit by the research bug. We kind of found that renewed love for being able to dive into the archives and find these stories, and putting together the scripts that we now share with people roughly every other Monday is usually when we're doing them.
We can relate to the every other Monday thing, can't we, Brandon?
Yes, we can.
So I don't think I've ever asked you guys this, because I've also seen Chris and Beth at various paranormal investigations. We're friends. You guys are friends with Steve Dills from Transcend Paranormal, Robert Bradley from CPRI. So how did you get involved in the investigation side of things?
Steve actually called us or messaged us to help out one day with a Haunted Henriques event, and that's kind of how we got involved with them, and that's how we met Robert Bradley. We now work with both groups. With Robert Bradley and CPRI, we work with them with the John Marshall House, and sometimes over at Scotchtown or down at Bacon's Castle.
They'll sometimes let us tag along at those locations, and we
help out with an investigation.
We greatly appreciate the privilege of doing that with CPRI, and we also help out with Transcend Paranormal, the investigations that they do. As often as we're available. I know we've missed the last couple, unfortunately, but we're oftentimes with them up at Hanover Tavern, Hanover Courthouse, but we've also joined them at Scotchtown, at a couple locations in Ashland, as you mentioned, Haunted Henriques. So we've gotten out with both Transcend and CPRI on a couple of occasions to help with them with their investigations, and on occasion, we'll do a little something ourselves.
Yeah, this past December, we organized a trip down to Key West. And do investigations down there.
Yeah. So had a great time back in December with a small group down in Key West doing some investigations down there. So we also get out and do that side of the spooky stuff too.
Beth and I know about one of those locations together.
Yeah, we don't go in that location if we can avoid it.
Yeah, and unfortunately I can't. Yeah. Oh well. But that's beside the point. So let's go back to some archival stuff. So what has been one of the favorite things that you have found with archival material that have been fleshed into one of the stories?
I'm actually going to go with the tortoiseshell comb story.
Yes, that's a great one.
This is actually part of our new tour, Shades Inspectors of Port End. A lot of people may be familiar with the name Virginia Hawes. or definitely with her son, Albert Hawes. He's the one who wrote the Lassie books.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of people actually attributed it to her, but it was Albert who wrote them. It was called Lad, a dog. He had a penchant for golden retrievers and wrote about their golden retriever. And then when it got turned into the TV series and movie, that's when it got named Lassie.
And it was a collie.
Yep.
Yeah. But the entire family were writers. All the kids, Virginia was. She was basically a combination of Julia Child, Dear Abby.
She did a little bit of everything.
She did a bit of everything.
Yeah, she did news articles, she did novels, both
She did
fiction,
cookbooks.
nonfiction, and she did actually do a couple of ghost books as well. So she wrote a couple of ghost books.
But it's through her ghost books that she wrote about her childhood home, which was located in the Cornet neighborhood of Richmond.
It was actually her memoir.
Yeah.
She wrote a memoir, and she dedicated an entire chapter of this memoir to the family's resident ghost that was in the house that the family lived in the Cornet neighborhood.
And I first came across this story when I was reading the L.B. Taylor books
Mm-hmm.
of Haunted Richmond, and it's mentioned in a couple of other ones. And then that's when we started to kind of dive into that story and discover about the whole Hawes family.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And L.B. Taylor does have, for people that don't know, for people that might be outside of Virginia, L.B. Taylor is like prolific when it comes to releasing all these collections about all these different Virginia ghosts and legends and hauntings. And many of us who have been involved in the paranormal in Virginia, we started out by reading his books. A fair number of us. They're charming. They're very charming.
Yeah, I mean he was just such a prolific researcher. That he dug up all these stories is just quite remarkable. Regret never being able to actually meet the gentleman. I think
he has passed away.
He has passed. Yeah.
Was it 2009? It's been a few years, unfortunately, but during his life, he wrote a lot about ghosts all across Virginia.
And it wasn't just a one-time thing. He would revisit stories as he got more information.
Mm-hmm.
So you will find some of them in several books.
For anyone who's interested, I'll put a link about his books on the show notes, because you can find them. You can definitely find them on Amazon or any of the major bookstores. So
there's a couple of them that are they're kind of rare and hard to find. We do not have the complete collection ourselves, but
keep trying.
We keep trying. Unfortunately, they're all out of print, and you can find some of them very commonly as used books, but there's a couple specific editions that are
hard to get.
Good to know. I keep forgetting about that. Hi, Brandon.
What about you, Chris? I mean, what's yours?
Oh, my backstory. So, I'm personally, I guess what we call a chiller. I'm somebody that I really do not have very direct paranormal experiences. When somebody in the room, Beth, is maybe sensing or having some experience, I could be standing right next to her with absolutely nothing. I can tell that something's kind of going on because you can tell.
He can read my body language.
Yeah, the body language kind of speaks volumes. It's not just Beth. I mean, we just with what we do, we've gotten to know a lot of sensitive people in the community, and Whitney, yourself included, of course. And we've so I'm just somebody. I'm the paranormal investigative team member that people like to have along as a sanity check if they want to have a sanity check.
Agreed.
He's the debunker in the group.
True.
Now that's not to say I've never had anything paranormal happen. I will say it was just it's been over a year now. Yeah. But one of the times that we were at Hanover Tavern helping with an investigation, we were. It was one of the nights where we were investigating 4 locations: the tavern, the courthouse, the jail, and the library. Mm-hmm. Now, the library is not all the time, but oftentimes it's considered kind of the throwaway location. It's one that's just kind of added to the itinerary to have a fourth spot. But activity has happened there, so it's not, there's reason to have it on the itinerary. It's just usually not that active. Well, on this given evening, I was leading a group into the library, and we were going to be the first group in there that evening. And my task was to lead the group in there, and a lot of these people were, they were rookie investigators. This was one of their fundraising investigations, and they'd never been out doing anything like this. So as we get them in there, I start kind of pulling out various pieces of equipment and showing them and kind of explaining what these various pieces of equipment do. And as about 12 of us are standing there in the main foyer of the library, kind of having this little chit chat, it's a small library. It's basically like a large house. And the second floor of the library is set aside as office space. There's no collections up there. There's nothing up there for the general public. And matter of fact, for the purposes of the investigation, nobody was supposed to be up there. We were just supposed to be in the library proper. Well, just not 5 minutes inside the library, as we're there talking, above us, hear very clear footsteps going from one end of the library to the other, down the hallway on that second floor. And everybody kind of like looks around, like, did somebody get away from the group? Did somebody go upstairs? And, head count checked out, nobody was missing. And so myself and one of the other lead investigators, the two of us, we went upstairs, walked back and forth, checked everything out up there. There was not a single person to be found up there at all. And when we came back downstairs, everybody who had remained downstairs said that, oh yeah, when the two of you were up there walking around, it sounded exactly like the footsteps we had heard before you went upstairs. So there was something pacing around on that second floor that evening when, when nobody really should have been there.
And to show you the other side of that, when we got our first tour of the tavern up at Hanover Tavern, we were in the hyphen section. It was Chris, myself, and Steve Dills. Steve and I both heard a young female voice say, "Leave." He's standing right next to us and doesn't hear a thing. And looking at the two of us like, what just happened? What did I just miss?
Yeah, they turned and faced each other, jaws dropped, like they both knew what they heard, and I'm there looking at them like, what's going on? So yeah, that's not an uncommon occurrence around me.
It's
but yeah, as far as my interest in it, Beth says she dragged me kicking and screaming. She dragged me kicking and screaming into public speaking.
Every skill you can learn, he is proof.
If you 5 years ago, if you'd said, oh yeah, you're gonna give tours and you're gonna go and speak in front of groups and do stuff like this, I would have said you're out of your mind. My whole purpose in the company before that was really behind the scenes stuff, doing the financials and the advertising and stuff like that. Stuff that did not have my face out there, certainly did not have my voice out there. But
then I lose my voice and he has to give my tour.
And I guess I did okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. My interest, I've always had an interest in history. I was fortunate to be raised by parents who took me to historic locations and enjoyed that kind of upbringing. And then I also I had a little bit of a passion for the paranormal too. I liked watching spooky stuff on TV.
Tales from the Crypt.
I was raised by the Crypt Keeper. Yes, but so I loved all that kind of stuff, and so just getting into this, this paranormal community, if you will, is it was a good fit for me. The public speaking took a little bit of work, but the paranormal community at large was not a far stretch for me.
Well, that's an interesting combination. You don't usually find anybody that can do the public speaking or do the tour guides and yet still be an engineer.
Yeah, yeah, that's my day job. Matter of fact, I spent all day helping teach a engineering class at work. So that's I engineer during the day, all numbers during the day, and then at night, here I am doing stuff like this.
Hey, it works for us.
Sorry, I'm a mischievous cat.
Beth will carry on. I'm not going far.
And also, Beth, you also have put up some pretty good Facebook Lives on cooking too.
Yeah, something that, again, people are just like, hey, you do all these great posts about what you have prepared. Can you show us how you prepare it? So on my personal page, I've started cooking with kittens because my cats always make an appearance while I cook.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
Yeah.
All right. I think it's story time. So, Beth.
Where do we want to start?
Ooh, let's see. So you keep mentioning Court End. So I know that's the neighborhood around the Virginia State Capitol, and also the White House of the Confederacy is there. It's called Court End because that's where the courts are. Now, you mentioned the John Marshall House, but what else there is particularly interesting that you think people might like?
We do have the Egyptian building. It is haunted.
Ooh,
yeah,
okay.
The Egyptian building is it's an architectural gem, and it's coming up on a couple hundred years old. It dates back to the 1830s when it was the Hampton-Sydney Medical School.
Yeah. They needed a new building in town, and so the Egyptian craze was quite popular at that point in time, and it was just an outdoor thematic facade. And then in the 1920s, when they did a renovation, that's when they brought the theme inside.
Yeah, you always hear about the Greek revival and like Romanesque revival, that type of architecture. There was a period where there was a Egyptian revival, and I think in Richmond, I think it's the only example of Egyptian revival that
I think so, yeah.
But it's an absolute gem of a building.
Yeah,
it's
so today it is part of the medical college. They have offices in there. They have a what used to be the dissection lab is now the theater inside that they use for lectures. But again, not everybody realizes that, well, it's not just the living in the building. It's also part of VCU's very dark history. Again, being a medical school, you need to dissect things to learn anatomy and about the human body and then how to treat it. But during the 1800s, you couldn't legally get a cadaver. It was actually illegal to donate your body to science. So we have what are known as resurrectionists. These are the gentlemen that go out to the graveyards and they dig up bodies and they bring them back to the medical schools and they sell them for profit.
Not to be confused with grave robbers.
Yeah.
Because resurrectionists very specifically only stole the body. If there was clothing, they would leave clothing, jewelry, anything else was left in the grave. The reason for that is because if they got caught, and usually resurrectionists got caught at some point in their career, if you will, the law penalty for stealing a cadaver was actually less than stealing the items that were buried with the cadaver. So you would face more fines, more jail time for making off with all the clothing and the jewelry and all that as well, versus just stealing the body.
Good
One of those things.
The more you know. Wow. Wow.
So VCU actually did employ a resurrectionist. His name was Old Chris. His parents were the
Chris Baker.
Chris Baker, yeah.
Lots of Chris's in this.
So his parents were the custodians of the property. So he grew up in the old Egyptian building. There are tunnels running underneath it that he used to go in and out of to bring the bodies in and out. You can actually look him up in some of the old photographs and see him posing with the cadaver and with the medical students.
Huh.
Yeah. But he lived into what they think are his 90s. They don't actually have a birth date for him. But that was pretty incredible considering the chemicals he was working with as a resurrectionist and cleaning up at the college and stuff. He probably knew more about anatomy than most of the students based on his job.
But yeah, so he when he did pass away, he wasn't honestly much missed by the community. He's
African American.
He was an African American man, and most of the individuals who had their bodies stolen were amongst the African American community at that time. He earned himself the nickname the Boogeyman of Jackson Ward. And he was basically completely exiled from the African American community as it was.
So he still haunts the building today. You actually can hear him down in the tunnel areas in the lower levels because you'll hear him walking with one of those old carts, the old squeaky wheel hospital carts.
Oh, wow.
And I always picture the scene from Return to Oz in the very beginning where you have that, squeaky wheel. And I was like, yeah, okay, I can visualize this pretty well. But he's not the only one there. There's apparently a doctor who's also seen on the upper levels walking the hallways. Several of the staff have reported seeing him walk by one part of their windows, but when there's a turn, he doesn't make the turn, and there's nowhere else to go in that hallway. So they, rush out. Oh, are you lost? Are you new doctors? And there's absolutely nobody there. There's also a report of a bathroom that is haunted. At this time, it's the guy's bathroom.
Yeah, for a
change. But the water will get turned on in there and just run in the faucets to the point where people call maintenance. But when they are about to go in to turn off the faucet, it's already turned off. So.
Yeah, that was reported. Most specifically, there was a woman that went in. She was working late at the Egyptian building, and to the best of her knowledge, she was the only one in the building. She heard the water running, didn't want to burst into the men's restroom, and she thought it was very odd when she heard the water running still a couple hours later, and hence the call to maintenance and the
security as well.
Yeah, security and the subsequent events with the water doing its own thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the Egyptian building, definitely a really, really cool place. I mean, it's a beautiful building, stands out like a sore thumb in a positive way.
Yeah. It's not belong, but it's cool looking.
Yeah. But definitely has its spooky history as well.
That's really cool. That's actually stuff I didn't even know about. That's really neat.
Yeah, I actually found out about it through an event that VCU was doing when they were actually digging into their darker history. And they did a whole talk about old Chris.
Neat.
I can just imagine how much worse it would have been for him. I mean, I don't want to imagine, but I can, if he would have been digging up, white graves as opposed to the African American ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he stuck to pauper graves and to, as I said, the African American ones. They would, if they could, get them from the prison as well, especially from that had been hung. But not always.
Not always, and it wasn't enough. It didn't fulfill the demand.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
very grim aspect of VCU's history, which they admittedly have done a much better job of acknowledging in recent years.
And I mean, it's the grim history of any medical college because they needed to be able to do this, to practice, to better understand how to treat people.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. That's a pretty cool story. I liked that one. Did you like that one, Brandon?
I want to know, I thought you guys mentioned something before the show, something about a vampire.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So when we talk about me learning how to do public speaking,
This is his story.
This is my story. This is the one
Go, Chris.
Helped me. It helped me break out of my shell. It helped me learn how to do the public speaking thing. Because It's not just about a vampire, but it's also about what is our Churchill train tunnel. Now, being an engineer, I have a kind of a thing for, notable engineering feats, and the Churchill train tunnel is one of those engineering feats.
Yeah.
Now, it's really close to where we're standing. We're not quite right.
About half a block that way.
Half a block from where we are, the Churchill train tunnel runs underneath Church Hill.
Yep.
This was built by the C&O Railroad back in the early 1870s to provide a source of transportation from downtown Richmond, such as it was in the era, down to the markets in the east. The C&O Railroad had every right to be convinced that they could go ahead and build this tunnel without a problem, but there was one major detail that they neglected. While they had a lot of experience building tunnels in the mountains out to the west, they did not have a whole heck of a lot of tunneling experience in clay, and that is what Church Hill is. It's a big lump of clay sitting on the side of Richmond. So they were not necessarily prepared for the issues that they had with minor cave-ins, with water seepage, and a whole laundry list of just about everything that could go wrong in a construction project. And even though they did manage to finish the tunnel and get it open for business, if you will, by the time they did so, it had already earned itself the nickname the Tunnel of Death because of how many accidents that they had had. Despite this, they do use the tunnel for the better part of 25 to 30 years. It is eventually made obsolete by the railroad viaduct that still stands and operates in downtown Richmond today. But as nice as that viaduct is, when we get into the 1920s, well, the 1920s, you may have heard the nickname the Roaring 20s. The economy is booming, and that viaduct, as nice as it is just overwhelmed with railroad traffic. They don't have enough capacity. So the C&O Railroad takes a look at the Churchill train tunnel and says, you know what, we can renovate the tunnel, make it just as good and just as safe as anything else that we have on our system today. Their confidence was justified because they got to work on renovating the tunnel, and basically what this entails is that every day, a couple hundred day laborers are entering the tunnel, they're excavating out the old red brick lining, they're expanding the tunnel a little bit, and then they're sliding in concrete cylinders that are better designed to hold back the hillside. So unlike the initial round of construction, this time things get off to a fantastic start. They're cruising right along day in, day out, really no major accidents to speak of, but it is generating a lot of debris. All these bricks and all this extra dirt have to go somewhere. So on almost a daily basis, you have a steam engine roll into the tunnel with a bunch of empty flatbed cars. They take these flatbed cars, the day laborers then fill them with all the debris. Well, as we get through the construction process, there's only about 300 linear feet left to finish. They're working in the area below what is now called Jefferson Hill Park. And on the afternoon of October 2nd, 1925, engine 231 rolls into the tunnel manned by Tom Mason and Ben Mosby with all the empty flatbed cars. As they get into the tunnel and get into the area that's being worked on by the far west end of the tunnel underneath Jefferson Hill, they bring the train to a halt, and Ben, just kind of sitting around, biding his time, waiting for the laborers to do their thing, notices that something's not quite right. He sees that on that old red brick ceiling that is yet to be renovated, that there's a brick that seems to be a little loose. And sure enough, he watches as that brick breaks loose and clatters to the floor of the tunnel. He knows that this is really bad news given the history of the tunnel, and he shouts, "She's a-comin'." And that is the only warning that these 200 plus men had to get out of the tunnel as fast as they can. Unfortunately, just a brief moment later, a larger chunk of the ceiling collapses, square on the broiler of the steam engine. It ruptures the broiler, the tunnel fills up with scalding hot steam, shorts out the electric lights that everybody's using to work by, plunging them into darkness. It is a really nasty and hellish atmosphere if you care to try and imagine it. Unfortunately, for most of the day laborers, they're back behind the steam engine, and they run back out the full length of the tunnel to the east end. But unfortunately for Ben, Tom, and a handful of day laborers, they were caught up in the midst of this collapse. And Ben, for his part, being the fireman on the steam engine, had caught the blast of that broiler point blank. He's severely burned. He's battered by all kinds of falling debris. And despite these injuries, he manages to get himself out of the tunnel. He crawls back out to the far east end of the tunnel, by which point, when he makes it out there, it's absolute pandemonium. People are running every which way, trying to figure out what needs to be done. And as he emerges, of course, people rush up to try and lend him assistance. He looks absolutely horrid. He has the presence of mind to say, if you hurry up, you can get to Tom. Tom is still inside. Tom was the engineer on the steam engine. Now, Ben, for his part, he winds up getting taken to the hospital, and he succumbs to his injuries later that evening. He winds up ultimately getting buried at Hollywood Cemetery, which is an important point that I'll get back to in just a moment. They do dig in the tunnel, but they have a very, very difficult time trying to get back to the steam engine. Ultimately, it does take them 8 days to get back to the steam engine, at which point they do find Tom. He's unfortunately passed away. For better or for worse, it looks like he was killed in the initial collapse of the tunnel, so it's not like he really suffered or suffocated in there. They get him out, give him a proper burial. They do keep digging for another week and a half to 2 weeks because there's 2 day laborers by the names of Henry and Lewis that are unaccounted for. These gentlemen, ultimately, they're never found. By the time they wind up calling off the search, basically 3+ weeks have gone by. They have to admit there's no way the men could be alive in the tunnel, and the hillside is so unstable that the people that are digging around in there are now putting their own lives at risk trying to find these 2 individuals that there's no way they can be alive. So they seal up the tunnel, they walk away from it, and if you go over and look specifically at the west entrance of the Churchill train tunnel today, it is sealed up. It is the final resting place of Henry and Lewis. They're entombed in there with engine 231, not maybe but 300 feet back from that entrance to this very day. So, very tragic, true story, what happened here in Richmond back in 1925. But
it does spark an urban legend, which is the story of the Richmond vampire. So this story actually doesn't get put to print until about a decade after the collapse. That is when it first appears in the local newspaper, and it's had a lot of time to percolate and kind of develop in that time period. So the story starts with the train tunnel collapse happening, a group of people running up to the train tunnel to lend some type of assistance, help with the digging, help with the wounded, that sort of thing. But when they get up there, they find 2 people. One gentleman is laying on the ground. He's absolutely filthy, as if he's just come out of the train tunnel. Sorry, we have a cat fight going on.
Kitties!
The second gentleman is impeccably dressed. He's bent over the other gentleman. It looks like he's trying to provide some type of medical aid. That looks okay until he stands up and he smiles at the group of people that have come running up, and they realize he has some sharp, pointy teeth. The blood coming out of his mouth. They scream, vampire. Now you have to think 1925, really? Yes, really. Nosferatu has just come out. People are very much afraid of things that go bump in the night. And so these now rescuers become would-be vampire hunters, and they follow this gentleman a full 5 kilometers up and down 2 hills over to Hollywood Cemetery, where they claim to see him run into the tomb of William Waltham Poole. Now, Mr. Poole's been dead for a couple of years at this point in time. He was eccentric, he was wealthy, and he was paranoid. And this all goes into his tomb. He was afraid of being buried alive, something that happened a lot when he was growing up. So he has a trick door put on the tomb that is very easy to open from the inside. So should he find himself in his tomb, he can just let himself out. He was also afraid of grave robbers. He didn't want his tomb to be robbed. He didn't want his body to be snatched. So he has it be very difficult to open the door from the outside. So in runs the vampire. Vampire closes the door. The group of men cannot get in because of that trick door. They go over to the custodians of the cemetery and say, you need to let us in. We've got a vampire. We need to stake it. The custodial crew has not heard anything about the train tunnel collapse. This is not our day of modern technology. And so they think these guys have been drinking. and they send them home. This has started a very long tradition of vampire hunting over at Hollywood Cemetery.
And they hate it.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
they do.
It got so bad that in 1997, they took a blowtorch to that trick door. It is no longer there. It is a new door there. But they took the pools out. They reburied them in an undisclosed location, still in Hollywood Cemetery. They put a new door up. That door is welded shut. You literally can't open it. They put gates in front of it. They welded those shut. And they also threw chains on there. Now, in the past few years, those chains have disappeared. I'm not sure if somebody took them as a souvenir or whatnot.
Most likely.
Probably. It doesn't stop people from going over there and trying to hunt the vampire. Hollywood Cemetery, you are not allowed to talk about this at all. It can get you fired. They have no ghosts whatsoever. That is their official line because they are still a working cemetery.
We respect that.
We do.
Basically, we respect that.
Yeah,
So,
that's why we present this at It Is a Legend. So
we would love to do a ghost tour over Hollywood Cemetery, but we respect their decision.
Yeah.
So where does this all come into actually being facts? Legends are born from very small facts and lots of embellishment. We think a game of telephone happened. As we mentioned, Ben Mosby is buried at Hollywood Cemetery. He's about 1,000 feet away. But he's buried there. And when he came out of the train tunnel, he was burned. He had very, very waxy-like skin. He had a mouthful of broken teeth, blood coming out of that mouth. We think somebody described him to somebody else, and this happened over and over again until one time somebody says, you know what, he looked like a vampire. And all of a sudden we have a vampire at Hollywood Cemetery.
At the collapse of the Churchill train tunnel.
Yeah. Now you add into that where the pool tomb is located, it's a very low-lying area. When the weather conditions are right, you've got a lot of mist in that low-lying area.
Yep.
You even get mist coming out of the tomb because of the air difference between what's in the tomb and what's outside. There's also a culvert near there where bats like to roost, and they like to come in and out at sunrise and sunset. So you throw all of this together, we have a nice metaphorical blender, and we get a Richmond vampire.
So,
Who apparently has a Facebook page.
He does.
He does have a Facebook page. He usually only comes out to comment on posts when somebody is maybe having a little bit of fun at the vampire's expense.
Last time I think we saw him post, twice.
The last I saw was RVA Coffee Stain.
Yes.
RVA Coffee Stain is a local artist, and he did a little meme type kind of caricature sketch thing about the Richmond vampire, and the vampire just chimed in on the Facebook thread. Really?
He suggested the vampire likes some very poor beer.
Yes. Yep. So, anyways, yes, you can find him on Facebook. If you're so inclined, you can actually hunt the vampire quite legally up at Red Vein Escape up in Ashland. Yep. They have an escape room that's themed after the Richmond vampire.
I have done that one. It's fun.
Yep.
It is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it's a moment of infamy from my kid because he had seen the whole thing get built. Mm-hmm. So the three of us went through it together. And keep in mind, he was 8 when this happened. And he had the stake in his hand. The vampire came out of the coffin. It was a mannequin. And he lost it. He just started. And so I'm like, stake him. And he was screaming to the point. I grabbed the stake. I staked the vampire. We got out of the escape room with 30 seconds left on the clock. And the person who was managing the room was on the floor laughing because they could see you. And he's like, that's the most beautiful thing I ever saw. Sorry, Preston.
My nephew got to stake the vampire. He was very excited.
Oh, yeah. Preston's much better about stuff like that now. But is there an actual haunting around the Churchill Tunnel?
There is, and actually a couple of different locations. So at the western end, there is a woman in 1920s clothing that is seen, basically grieving at this site. We actually think this is an imprint. Tom Mason's wife stood vigil every single day until his body was found, and so we think it was her emotions that had imprinted this woman there. people have seen a train light coming out of there, especially around the anniversary on October 2nd. That happens at the other end as well. The park above the train tunnel, they have heard people calling for help. They've heard the sound of pickaxes and digging. Same thing in the cold storage apartment complex right next to that side of the building. They have heard those things as well. Up in the Churchill, or what was formerly the Churchill Bank, the vault is very, very near the tunnel. And they actually have heard the sounds of men calling out help and digging there. We don't think that one's actually from the tunnel collapse. We think that's from the initial build when there was actually a sinkhole right up in that area as well. So,
but yeah, so the tunnel definitely the focal point of a lot of Richmond lore that we have here.
But a lot of it isn't active. It's mostly imprints that have been left there, the emotional imprint.
So I will say, anybody that wants to get their eyes on the tunnel, going to the west entrance is as close as I recommend getting. Now, the west entrance, it's nicer to look at. It's the kind of very traditional stonework coming out of the hillside.
It's the one that everybody takes a picture of.
Yeah, very photogenic, admittedly. Unfortunately, you can't walk very close to it anymore. They renovated the Richmond cold storage building right next to the train tunnel into apartments over a decade ago. And when they did that, they fenced off that whole area in front of the tunnel to utilize as a courtyard for the apartments. So you can't really get close to it unless you're an apartment tenant, but you can still see it through the fence. The east entrance, East entrance official position is number 1 is trespassing. It's still owned by CSX Transportation. So trespassing can go back there. People who go back there anyways are liable to get the police called on them by the neighbors around that area. They don't like people stomping around in there either. It's also just simply not safe. It's in a heavily wooded, swampy, low-lying area today.
Lots of bitey things, lots of poisonous things, lots of thorny things.
Yeah.
You don't want to go back there.
Yeah. And I will say, the only thing I will say is that if you truly decide to disregard our cautions about the trespassing and all that, if you insist on going down there, best time to do it is actually in the winter months when all the bitey things are sleeping and all the poisonous stuff is basically dead. So, but it's really,
you don't want to go down there.
It's not the safest thing to go see, and it's also really not that much to look at because that end of the tunnel was successfully renovated. So all you really have is you have kind of this massive concrete tube coming out of the hillside. It's nowhere near as photogenic as the west end of the tunnel that didn't quite get the full renovation. Since they never managed to complete it.
And it is sealed off at both ends. The eastern end, you can go in a little bit, which people try to do, but you will eventually run into a sealed wall.
And on that note, yes, that is very good. Good safety tips. Because, I mean, and that's interesting because I've noticed that when some people do take ghost tours, they automatically think, oh, do we get access? And that's a lot of these places where ghost tours are given. Some of them are just outside. They're closed to the public for, the business is closed for the day. Some of them are still private residences.
And
I think, and so how do you deal with that with the public when they're like, oh, can we go in there? Can we go in there?
Yeah, the way we generally handle it, I mean, we make it very clear up front that all of our traditional walking tours are outdoor events. We do, occasionally we'll do like a haunted dinner event that basically we can go in and tell ghost stories in while people are sitting down and having a meal, or we'll do a pub crawl. Same deal. We'll go from location to location and tell ghost stories inside pubs that are, have ghost stories related to them.
But there won't be any investigation. It's just storytelling.
Yeah.
And then occasionally we do partner with places like the John Marshall House,
Yes.
where it's their docents giving the inside ghost story telling event, and that's actually where CPRI comes in, because they talk about their investigations that they have there as well. And then after that 45 minutes, we take you outside to the neighborhood and we go talk about some of the other buildings that are in the neighborhood.
Yeah. But as far as going inside goes, well, we're not fortunate enough to really be able to have traditional ghost tours that go inside locations. I can say that if you really want that kind of experience, your best bet is to go to a location that's very touristy. Place like a Charleston or a Savannah or something like that. And
Orlando.
The reason for that is that in those locations, those ghost tour companies basically can run almost 365 days a year and sell out tours almost every single night. They're making money hand over fist, and by doing that, they can actually go and invest in like purchasing some of this haunted real estate to go ahead and take people inside.
Would we like to get there? Absolutely. We're not there yet.
We're not there in Richmond. If people want to come out and take our tours and sell our tours 365 days a year, we would love to have you. But our market just is not there, and as such, we do not have that capital to be able to invest in actually going and purchasing haunted locations to take people inside on our ghost tours. And the other thing on that note is that places that take you inside on ghost tours, you're gonna probably be paying at least 60 or 70% more for a ticket for that tour versus our outdoor walking tour. So they're not cheap tours.
Yeah, because they have to cover their, of course, mortgage costs, but also their insurance costs.
Yeah, insurance goes up considerably.
The thing with them, though, is they don't offer the possibility of a misdemeanor charge.
Yeah, that's that too.
Yep, there is that.
That's always fun.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
You'll never forget it because it'll be on
Tour's
your
been
record.
going since 2005. Nobody's been arrested on tour yet. We plan on keeping it that way.
And on that wonderful note, guys, what's coming up next for Haunts of Richmond?
Oh, let's see. So we're kind of figuring that out as we go. Actually, one of the things, kind of on the note of going inside, we're eyeballing the idea of kind of doing like a paranormal 101 type thing. It's something that would get people inside for actually. I mean, it would be more of actually a paranormal investigation type deal than it would be a storytelling event. So we're
trying to figure out logistics on that first.
Yes, we got a long ways to go on getting the groundwork in place to be able to do that. But we've kind of not completely, but we're getting pretty close to kind of tapping out Richmond on what we can conceivably do as walking ghost tours.
Right.
We have 6 routes now. The Court End one is our newest one. That makes number 6. While there are certainly more stories in Richmond to share, most of them are a little too far out of reach to be able to walk to. We have them in our library, maybe be able to pull them out for something,
or a speaking deal, or
speaking
something like
deals, that. Or if we ever manage to get something kind of on wheels, so to speak, a kind of a driving tour. But we're kind of at the point where we're full up on our walking ability. So that said, still 6 tours to come on check out, with each neighborhood very unique, kind of unique feels to it, unique stories. Richmond has gifted us with a lot of stuff to work with.
Yeah.
So
as for developing other things besides our Facebook Live, there is talk of a podcast at some point in time. We've got enough material that we could do one. We just need to find the time to actually sit down and record.
Time.
Time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hi,
that's
Tuna.
where we're at.
I
Yep.
see.
Well,
a
if you guys ever need help with any of the logistics for setting up like a public investigation or anything, get a hold of me, because I've ran and set up a lot of different ones for that type of stuff, and I'd be more than happy to help you guys.
Oh, appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
We could definitely
Absolutely.
keep that in mind as we get to that point. We're in the very, very near term. We have a vacation coming up in less than a month's time, and we're just kind of looking forward to that right now.
Yeah.
So we figured
Enjoy
that we're hoping that when we get back from vacation, we'll be well rested and relaxed and refreshed and ready to possibly start tackling some new projects at that time.
And the cats.
And yes. So this is Yuna.
She is our original one out of the group we have right now.
So
Yep. Hi, Yuna.
Queen Bee.
She's a good girl.
Oh, she
All
is.
right. And of course, we will put Haunts of Richmond and the many ways to contact you guys up in the show notes. I know you guys are active on Facebook. Are you guys also active on other social media outlets?
Instagram.
Yep.
Instagram too. All right.
Facebook,
Perfect.
Instagram, and YouTube are our three main kind of social media channels.
Perfect. Yep,
Yeah,
we
that's
can
it.
go. Yeah.
So,
Boy, what a night. We got to have you guys back on because, I mean, we just scratched the surface.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
we could talk all night. Not a good idea.
Not a good
Let's
idea.
have to get up early tomorrow morning.
But yes, we could easily
That-
talk all night. We could talk at length about all kinds of spooky stuff near and far. So yeah, we always have something going on. We're also still kind of admittedly just kind of coming down from the last big project we had, which was, we mentioned earlier, that paranormal investigation we did in Key West.
Yep.
That was 2 years in the making. So even though it's been 4 months now since we did that, that was
big.
That was a big deal, and we're
Immediately followed it up with speaking at GalaxyCon, which was another new big one for us. And
Yep.
hopefully that will not be the only time we'll speak at GalaxyCon.
yes. So, looking
GalaxyCon
forward to
is
future opportunities for that.
yeah. GalaxyCon was fantastic,
Yeah.
and I also got to give kudos to Marcia because she was there presenting too, and she left me with an image that I will not soon forget. Beth knows which one that is. Yep, the Captain Morgan pose. Marcia, we love you. All right.
And
So,
another one
yeah.
of our, I will give a shout out. Another one of our amazing guides, Zoe, helped with the fourth panel that we did at GalaxyCon on Sunday. So we Marcia helped on Saturday with one of them. Zoe helped with one on Sunday, and they're just two of the amazing set of guides that we have at Haunts of Richmond that help us keep things kicking.
Nice.
there you have it. All right. Well, guys, we're going to say goodnight because if we keep on going, we're going to go crazy.
Sounds good.
We'll talk your ears off if you let us.
Oh, I know, and we've got some other stuff to hang out with another time. I got to tell you all about St. Albans later. All right, but on that happy note, friends, thank you to Beth and Chris from Haunts of Richmond for being our guests tonight.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you for having us.
oh, it's our absolute pleasure. And Para family, thanks for tuning in. And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please remember to take a second and leave us 5 stars or leave us a review because it helps us get the word out about the show. And we need the feedback to help make the show better. Right, Brandon?
Absolutely, Whitney. And if you're an Android listener, you can follow us on Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or just simply say, Alexa, play the Para-Unity podcast. And she's like, yep, I'll get that on right now.
Does she actually have that voice? I need to
I
get
don't know.
her.
I'm sure you could program that.
That would be so awesome.
Yes, make your Alexa sound like Brandon. Yes. Yes. That way she can treat you like garbage whenever you like. No.
I was actually thinking, program your Alexa to sound like she's got like a smoker's cough or
No.
something.
That would be hilarious too.
That would be awesome.
I still think you should make it sound like me.
Yeah, we will.
That would be phenomenal. That would make my day. Fans,
Aye.
do that. Make your Alexa sound like Brandon. Anyways, do this stuff so you never miss an episode. Remember, if you like the show, tell a friend. If you want to be a guest on the show or just want more Para Unity, join us on our Facebook or Instagrams. If you want to help the show, as always, stop by our website and buy us a coffee. Please do it soon. I'm running out of caffeine.
Yeah, I am too.
But my name is Brandon.
And I'm Whitney, and you've been with us in the place to bring our paranormal families a lot closer together, the Para Unity Podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.